Everybody, welcome to the Wednesday Word. Here we are again, first week in September, which is bizarro. I know, so weird. I don't even know how time is going like this. It freaks me out every time I talk about it. I probably talked about it too much, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot even believe like we're headed like lockstep into 2025. I don't know what anyways, okay. So welcome to Unleashed Ministries. I'm Pastor Nathan. If you want to help our channel by liking and subscribing, that would be awesome. And if you can help us financially and you feel like we've really blessed you in bringing forth what we bring forth, then please go to unleashedministries.net and click on the give link. And if you could help us there financially, just buy a gift because we're blessing you and you could bless us that way, that would be amazing. So we're again super thankful to everyone who does. We're very, very appreciative. So, okay, we're going to jump right in after always have to get like that housekeeping stuff done before every video because it's important that we do that. So I am, again, if you're first time to this, we do chapter by chapter, verse by verse, teaching on Mondays at 10. Wednesdays at 10, we release the Wednesday word, which is really more along the prophetic word that I feel like God has like in this season. Like, what is God saying now? Like what I feel like the Lord is saying now. And I try to bring that forth, whatever word I'm getting that week, sometimes that day. Sometimes I'll have a dream or a vision, literally the same day sometimes, or the night before, like I had last week. And I've had a lot of these encounters. So I did have another encounter. And also, if you're new to Unleashed Ministries, on Friday mornings at 10, we release a podcast from time to time, and we will this week. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I'm way excited to see what happens with that and what God does with it, because I'm really excited about the guests we're bringing in. I can't wait till you meet them. I'm not gonna spoil it now, but I think you guys are gonna be very interested and blessed by who's coming in. I think it's gonna be really cool. So anyway, I want to jump into this and the encounter I actually had with this. So I'll tell you how I processed this with the Lord, or what I was praying actually that kind of led to this. So I don't know about you, but I do know that many of us are or have been for quite some time. Again, this like 5-year period, or some of you 10-year period, certainly 3 to 10 years, has been such a weird time. And I won't go into the depth of why that's been weird. I've kind of talked about this in the past, that many of us have been in this very weird season. And the season is a season of change. It's a season of upheaval, a season that we never saw coming, that we never anticipated we would ever really go through. And so we actually found ourselves in the last 5 years going places, being a certain way, of learning things up, our lives being turned upside down, to where now we're at a place where it's, again, not feeling like you're quite there, but it's definitely coming to an end. Like that time period is coming to an end, and there is a settling and a newness. But most of us, and I'll just tell you myself as well, have not entered into it yet. It's like we can feel it coming to, we can almost taste it. It's like it's right there, but we haven't gone there yet. It's like it's there, but it isn't, because the plate, what's in our hearts, what we're crying out to the Lord for, what we've come before Him and laid it all down for, we're not there. It feels like but it's getting there. So anyway, I was asking the Lord, okay, Lord, I feel and I know that many people are in that place, and some have been in that place for years. And I know we have been in that place for years, and many of you have as well. But I felt like the Lord's like, this is coming to an end. Like, we are at that time where it's very close. And I know I've probably said that before. You've probably heard a million words, from different people, like, it's almost there, hang on, And I understand sometimes prophetic people, you can feel like it's almost there, but it isn't. But I really feel like it actually is this time. But here's what I wanted to say. So I was simply asking the Lord about that. And I was kind of saying to Him, like, is there anything that I need to be aware of, or that other people need to be kind of more aware of in this time, that we like pitfalls, things we can't do or things we should be doing? And that is where I got this word. I actually heard in my prayer time, you can't take your past with you. And I heard it very, very strongly. So when I get a one liner like that from the Lord, I don't know, you might as well. When I get something like that, like you can't take your past with you, instantly I have a million ideas of what I think that might mean. I don't know if you do, but usually my heart and spirit are like, boom, my mind goes like, well, what's the 50 things that could possibly apply to? And it started doing that, but I had to calm myself down to be like, okay, I know the Lord just said you can't take your past with you. So what does that mean? Like, what are you saying, Lord? What does that actually mean? And show me what that means. And so I got led to, honestly, a scripture I would rather never preach on ever again. And you're kind of like, oh, why? Well, or what scripture would that be? And you'll know in a second when I'll actually tell you, it's Numbers 14. Now, you might go, well, why wouldn't you want to preach on that? Why wouldn't you want to talk about that? And I'll tell you why. Because I have heard more typological sermons. And if you don't know what typological is, it means that looking at something in particular in the Old Testament, it can be the New Testament as well, but usually in the Old Testament, where people will say, well, the Israelites went through XYZ, and your life will or is looking like XYZ. So your life is like a type of what the Israelites went through, and this is how God might be dealing with you in a similar way he dealt with them. So that's what we call typology. So anyway, I have heard more sermons, and I know you have too, on this passage typologically than any other passage ever. So I'll tell you what that is, and I'll read it to you so you can understand. So even as the Lord led me to this, I was like, Lord, I don't want to talk about the wilderness and the promised land and how God has a process and blah, blah, blah. So we have to be prepared, and we have to go through the desert wilderness to get to the promised land. And that's why I did the delay in your life and blah. I don't want to hear that anymore. I don't know how many sermons I heard on that. I mean, this is not a joke. I probably heard 100 sermons on the wilderness and the Israelites and your promised land, and you're almost there, and don't be afraid of the giants, and whatever, be like Joshua and Caleb. Maybe you haven't heard a million of them, but oh my goodness, I have. And I'm just so tired of it. I was like, I do not want to do that. But again, the Lord kept leading me back there. And it was, again, to the you can't take your past with you. And so I'm like, okay, I surrender. I will go to that passage and I will read it. And I was like telling the Lord, at least let it not be the same thing everybody says. Like, can you please show me something else? And honestly, he really did. And he really spoke to my heart and said, share this. And so I'm like, okay, I can totally do that. So I'm going to read what I wrote at the top of my page here. Is I had such a strong sense of movement, like we really were about to step into a whole new season. But we absolutely cannot take the old with us. So here we go. I'm going to briefly go through the things that the Lord showed me, and then I'll hit Numbers 14. We're going to start in Numbers 14:21. And again, I promise you, it's not going to be the same old, like God, is preparing you in the wilderness to finally take over your promised land, and he's getting the Egypt out of you and all of this kind of stuff. Like I promise you it won't be that. It's going to be something else. And I thank you, Jesus. So I'll show you this. What did God mean when he told me you can't take your past with you? Now I'm going to give you sort of the obvious things. And so these three things, I have three, what I call bad things, and three good things. So if you're taking notes, it would literally be like, here's the three bad things you can't take with you, and here's the three good things you can't take with you. So I once I get through those, I'm going to go to the scripture and show you kind of exactly how I think this is supposed to play out. So let's start with the bad things. Again, these are common. I think these three bad things most people would already know you shouldn't take with you, but I felt this very, very strongly. So let's start with the three bad things you cannot take with you in this next season. Again, probably heard them before or something like them, but when the Lord told me to go over it again, I'm like, okay, I'll go over it again. Number one, bad thing you cannot take with you into this new season, relational pain. Okay. Now, here is what I mean by that. Most of us have in the last 5 years some really tremendous relational pain. And by that, I mean we've gone through things in our relationships that were tremendously hurtful. And for some of us, it's like the last 5 and even 10 years. It was like maybe we had a hurtful thing happen in a relationship once in 10 years, right? Or once in 15 years. I'm speaking from personal experience. And then all of a sudden, 7 years ago, you go through more relational pain than you've been like in your entire life, right? Like it just seems like it could be a million things for you. It could be in the church, could be in your work, in your family. It's just this relational pain. And you're like, I don't even know what in the world's going on. And sometimes those things come so quickly is that you end up like this. This is actually what I saw in my prayer time, which is probably just my silly 80s kid mind. But if you've ever seen Labyrinth, have you ever seen that movie? Like it's an 80s movie with like David Bowie, and they go to this this literal labyrinth where this girl's trying to rescue her baby brother. Anyway, there's a point where she comes back to her room basically, and there's this weird looking Muppet woman there, and she has all this stuff on her back. Like she's literally stacked up to here with just tons of, it's just like knickknacks and garbage. I mean, that's what it looks like. But it is so big. Like the backpack is like 10 times the size of her. And it's just stuff all over the place that looks like worthless junk. And I actually saw that. I was like, that stuff some people are carrying. And part of that is relational pain. And it is a time, and I'm just going to tell you what to do, even though I know many of you already know what to do. I'm going to tell you anyway. We have to forgive, release, let go, bless, and pray for healing. So we have to forgive the people, release them, let them go, bless them, and then pray for healing for ourselves. And I felt like this is a time where we absolutely have to do this. Like it's like you cannot take your past with you. And that relational pain is something that must be dealt with like right now. So that's number one bad thing. We can't take that with us into this new season. It's got to be like, I'm making war on this thing. I'm praying for healing for this thing because I've got to be on the other side of it. That's number one. Number two, lack of money. Okay, you ready? This is a bad thing that we can't take into our new season. Now, I'm going to read what the Lord showed me in this realm. Lack of material blessings leads to patterns of thinking that work toward poverty and lack in the spirit. Let me read that one more time. Lack, like long, extended periods of a lack of material blessing leads to patterns of thinking that work toward poverty and lack in the spirit. Now, I want to show you, like today I was praying about this very thing. Like what I'm trying to say is like this past season, if there's been real struggles with money and jobs and material kinds of things, they will want to hang on to you. Like that struggle will want to hang on to you along with your relational pain. It's like that Muppet woman from Labyrinth. It's like it builds up on you and around you. And over time, you don't even realize you're carrying this. It's like you don't realize you have this massive backpack on you of relational pain and then lack of money. And it was a funny thing. I just want to, today, I don't know how I even came across this. It was like, it was one of those Facebook memes, like where people put, quotes from people and stuff. And I saw that, and it was some rich guy, and he was talking about the difference between wealthy people, or it was like 15 differences between wealthy people and poor people. And one of the things I remember he said was this. He said, wealthy people educate themselves. Poor people have themselves entertained. Then he said, wealthy people have libraries of books. Poor people have big TVs. I was like, it was like wealthy people have big libraries. Poor people have big TVs. Wealthy people educate themselves. Poor people have themselves entertained. And I thought, it was just a couple of things that sort of hit me. But I guess what I'm saying is this: that struggle will want to become who you are. And then once it becomes who you are, you really do take on like a poverty spirit. And I felt like the Lord said, you cannot take this into your next season. You can't take your past with you. Like that struggle with money, finances, job cannot be taken. It must be dealt with now. And this is the way you deal with this is you start to go, nope. Like, I have a good God. I have a big God. I'm not complaining about finances. I'm living in gratitude. I'm praising him for provision. I will not live there. I will live in a place where I know my God as provider, as Yahweh Yireh, which most of you guys know as Jehovah Jireh, which, by the way, there's no J sound like anywhere in Hebrew or Greek. I understand we transliterate it. The word Jehovah doesn't occur in the Bible ever. You'll only find that in the King James Version. That's why if you look at a modern translation like the American Standard or NIV, Jehovah does not exist. Jehovah was never a name of God. It's, in fact, a mistranslation. Anyway, that's just a little freebie. If you ever want to deep dive into that, I can show you exactly where it came from and how it ended up in the King James Version of the Bible. But anyways, my point is this. He is our provider. He's our provider, and we can't take that struggle into the next season. Does that make sense? So it's like that relational pain, that lack of money provision struggle cannot be taken into the next season. And you do that by going like, I will not live there. I will not work from that place. Just like I have to forgive, release, let go, and bless in terms of relational pain. With this lack, I have to go, I'm not living in lack. I'm not thinking that way. I will see the risen Lord. He is my provider. I mean, you've got to actually work against this and understand that the way that wealthy people work is like, I don't want to be entertained. I want to learn and grow. Right. And that's just part of it. So anyway, I'm not going to go deeply into that. I just saw this as one of the three things that we cannot enter into the next season with. So, which that was a terrible sentence because you're not supposed to end sentences with the preposition with. Anyway, let's move on. Okay. So the third one, past situations and experiences. For some reason, I wrote this out like this. When you are a slave, things tend to go the same way. In other words, these last 17 years for many people, there have been past situations and experiences that kind of form how you see the world. They're like, it's almost like they're forming your worldview. It's like past situations, when you walk through them long enough, they begin, and you don't even know this is happening, but they begin to like inform the way you see the world, and they inform your expectations. And this is something you cannot take into the next season with you. This is something where is going to be really different, I think, for every person. But it's where you got to pull back and go, okay, Lord, what have I, quote unquote, learned this last 7 years that actually isn't you? Like this last 7 years or whatever it is for you that you've been going through, what have I actually, because here's what I want people to understand is a lot of people think like, well, a wilderness season or a long season of, lack or delay or whatever, it's just growing me. It's just growing me and it's equipping me. It's just giving me tools I didn't have before and it's preparing me for this other thing. Now, there probably is truth to that. In other words, God uses every season, no matter what it is, growth, great seasons and crap seasons, to love you, to grow you, and to equip you. Every single thing is used for his glory and your growth. I mean, this is totally the way it is. But what people don't understand is when you do go also through a long season like that, you learn things you shouldn't learn. So no one talks about this. They just talk about all that pain you went through and that loss and that delay and that wilderness. It was so good because it grew you up as a Christian and it did this and that. And I'm like, maybe that's true. And I know that it is in many cases because I've grown a lot through a lot of things I've been through as well. But what you also have to realize is you learn things you shouldn't learn. So what do I mean by that? I mean that when I say learn things, in other words, you begin to form like your way of thinking, your way of relating to God, your way of seeing the world, your way of seeing the kingdom begins to be way more too informed in a bad way by what you went through. And that's what I mean by past situations and experiences, informing you in a bad way, like they're teaching you wrong things. So those kinds of seasons don't just, equip you and whatever, like prepare you, grow you. Although again, God uses them to do that. They oftentimes create a lot of damage and teach you things you ought never have learned. So I hope that makes sense. Like, let me just briefly give you an example. Like if someone is beaten with a belt every day of their life for every infraction they commit, now God can move on that. Someone might become very strong, very tough, very like, tough in the sense that, I think you know what I'm talking about, like that they can kind of take anything and keep going, and they're strong and they're tough and they won't back down because they've been beaten with belts and they've learned this toughness, right? But they've also learned something is wrong with them. They've also learned to be broken. They've also learned that love is painful. I mean, do you understand what I mean? They've learned a lot of things that they shouldn't have learned, that aren't good for them. And some of you have learned those things too. And God is saying you cannot take your past with you. So these are the three bad things: relational pain, lack of money, and past situations and experiences. These are the three things that God highlighted to me that we have to, right now in this time, ask him, where's that? Have I got the lack of money thing and the past situations and experiences? What has formed in me that ought not have? Because I am ready to move, and I'm telling you, God is ready to move, and we cannot bring this with us. So these are the three bad things we need to lift up. Okay, now we're going to shift into the three good things that we cannot take into the promised land, that we cannot take into this next season. I know you're like, good things? What do you mean? What do you mean by good things? And here's what I mean by that. These are things that happened in your past that were good. Like, they weren't bad. They were good, the good seasons. But some of you, because of the pain you've been through, you're actually holding on to them, almost like living in the past, if that makes sense. Like it's like you're living in the 80s, because that was the time before smartphones and the internet and, people disconnecting from one another and all this kind of stuff. So it's like you live in the 80s, but because you look at it with such nostalgia, that was such a good time. And that's when I was so close to God and that kind of thing. And that's what I mean by good things holding you back from going forward. So let me give you these three things. Number one, times where God moved in power. Some of you guys have these memories of these times in your life where God just moved in power. There's lots of times that could have occurred, but some of you are looking back at them like, oh, that was just so awesome. And what you're doing is you're not looking forward. And these are it's really good to remember what God did, just like the Israelites did. Sometimes they built monuments and stuff. They had feasts to remember what he did. That's good to remember what he did, but it's not okay to live there. You know what I mean? Like to be so invested in what God did in the past that you're not praying and looking for what he's doing now, or recognizing now and in the future, because it leaves you in this sort of nostalgic longing place that is actually quite unhealthy. And so that is the number one thing of the good things that you cannot take with you right into the new season. Again, it doesn't mean you don't remember them. It doesn't mean we don't praise God for them. Obviously, we have testimonies that we can always talk about, but it's like living there. You understand what I mean? In an unhealthy way. That's number one. Number two, I called this previous churches or groups you have been a part of where you really grew in the Lord or felt safe and loved. Some of you are looking back to like a small group, a church, some kind of group of people that you were involved with where you just felt so loved and so safe, and this was your community, and you can't move on from that. It's like you're still holding on or wishing things were like they used to be, and this is not helpful. Like, it's not going to help you go to the next place. So again, it's another one of the three good things that you can't bring into the next season. And just hold your horses. We're almost to the word. I mean, as far as like Numbers 14:21, I'll show you what God showed me in that. But that's the other thing. You can't keep longing for, this group you led 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or this church you were a part of. You can be thankful and grateful. Thank you, Lord, for that. But some of you are actually tied to it, and it's keeping you from moving forward. And then the last thing I just called a longing for yesteryear. And it's really kind of what characterizes the first two, but I just mean like in a general sense. It's like, oh, I just wish things were the way they were then, and it's like, like this is not going to be helpful to you. Like, going forward, you can't just keep longing for this other thing. And I want to tell you, because what God is bringing in many ways won't look like that thing. And so because it won't look like it or smell like it or oftentimes feel like it, you won't even know it's him if you're still longing for what was. So I hope this makes sense. I've actually encountered a number of people doing this. I can't tell you how many times that I've had people, especially that were part of the youth group, the youth ministry, back when I was leading it during the revival days in particular, and people just talk about it forever and ever. Now, I think it's good to talk about, man, God did powerful things. This is like 20 years ago, right? That God did powerful things and it was awesome, and kids were touched. And I give it as a testimony all the time. In fact, the next time I speak, I'm going to give it as a testimony. But which I think that's really good. But many of these people are like, that's all they want to talk about is all the things that happened then. And they're not able to go forward, right? And what God is going to do. So we can bring the good parts of that past. So this is the part you can bring with you, like the testimony, the power of it, like looking at what God did, but you can't pull it like as if you're there still. So I hope that makes sense. So you can't take your past with you, especially the 3 bad things and then the 3 good things I talked about. Now, let me get into the word and show you what God showed me here that I thought was really powerful. So most of you guys know, obviously, what occurred, but I'll read it to you anyways. Numbers 14:21. Obviously, Israelites get delivered from Egypt, from slavery, and they are called to what really would have been about a 2-week journey to go from Egypt to the promised land. And then God says, when you get there, you're going to have to take the land, basically. But he said, you can do it. And basically the Israelites were scared, and didn't want to take it. So Numbers 14:21. So the Lord said, I have pardoned them according to your word. Now, okay, what does that mean? Moses had cried out to the Lord because the Lord was so angry, right, with the Israelites for rejecting him, basically, and not wanting to go in and take the land because they didn't trust God. I mean, the bottom line was they didn't trust God. And I'm telling you, part of it was because they had their past with them. I think they definitely had the good things. Remember, they were like, what about the manna? Not manna, but they were like, we had bread, back in Egypt and we're starving out here. And then they were like, well, how much of them were carrying some of the pain from Egypt? So I think they were carrying bad things and good things, and therefore they couldn't go into the new because they didn't trust God. And by the way, most of the stuff has to do with trusting him. So they wouldn't go in. And so God's like, all right, that's it. I'm done. I'm obliterating these people. I'm over it. Basically is what God says. And Moses intercedes, like he steps in and goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, don't do that, God. Don't do that. And he prays for them and intercedes. And this is then God's response to Moses after God says, he'll pardon them, is what he says. So the Lord said, I have pardoned them according to your word. But indeed, as I live, all the earth will be filled with the glory of the Lord. Surely all the men who have seen my glory and my signs, which I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, yet have put me to test these 10 times and have not listened to my voice, shall by no means see the land which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who spurned me see it. But my servant Caleb, because he has had a different spirit. Now, here's an interesting thing. So obviously God is just angry. He's saying like, look, I'm not going to kill all of them, but they aren't going to see the land is what he says. They're not going to go into the promised land because they don't trust me. They've spurned me. And I'm going to let you guys know these things I listed, like if you bring these things with you, it is like spurning him. And I don't mean to sound harsh or whatever when I say that, but it came to me like, I don't know, disciplinary way. Like, please tell the people, you can't do this. You can't bring these things in. It is like spurning God, and you won't go in. When God is pulling you forward, you won't do it. Like you'll have these things heavy on you. And even when he's opening the doors, you won't go through them because you go through in the promised land in the spirit almost always before you see anything in the natural. And that's what he's calling you to right now. So, but what hung me up here a little bit was when he says, and something I've read over, but I didn't really hit me until this time. He says, but my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit. And I was like, a different spirit. See, all these things right here are working against you having a different spirit, right? They all speak to your past. They all speak to the spirit of yesterday. They all speak to a spirit over here. And God says, I'm calling you to a new spirit. I'm calling you to something new, something different. And he says, that's why Caleb got to go in, because he literally says, he's had a different spirit. And I was like, wow. So I actually looked up the Hebrew word that's translated here, different, thinking it would be nuanced or give me some understanding to what kind of difference that was. But as I studied the word, it really is super common and super basic. And it just simply means not the same as other things. So in other words, he has a different spirit, meaning all of them, I believe, they were bringing all their junk, and Caleb has a different spirit, a spirit that wasn't going to bring his junk. And that's why it says, he's followed me fully, and I will bring him into the land which he entered, and his descendants will take possession of it. Remember, guys, this isn't all about us. It really isn't. Going into the new, as God opens up these doors, is about us, or not just about us, but about our kids and our kids' kids going into something new and different and powerful. A different spirit. You need to have a different spirit. Now, let me read this last part. Most of you don't know that. Now, most people always know that part. They always know Israelites freed Egypt, rejected God, didn't trust him, all died in the wilderness except for the kids, right? Like the young kids, I think it was people under 20 got that at the time, were able to go in after 40 years. Everyone else died, right? That was basically what occurred. Everyone knows that. What everybody doesn't know is this part of it. Or I would say everybody, but most people are not aware of this part of the story. And that was like, oh, so thankful. Thank you, Lord. I can read a part of the story most people aren't aware of. Look at Numbers 14:39. When Moses spoke these words to all the sons of Israel, so he tells the sons of Israel, you're not going. Basically, you're not taking the promised land because you won't go in now. You're rejecting God. You don't trust him, blah, blah, blah. The people mourned greatly. So obviously they're really upset. Then verse 40, in the morning, however, they rose up early and went to the ridge of the hill country, saying, here we are. We have indeed sinned, but we will go up to the place which the Lord has promised. Now, most people don't talk about that they get rejected, but then they're like, we sinned and all, but we're going anyway. Do you see that? They're like, we're still going to take the land. Like, we're still going in. And I'm telling you, that's why it is so important to not take these 6 things to get them off of your back right now. Because if you try to take the land without the Lord, well, look what happens. But I think most people don't know that all of Israel stood up to go take the land, even after they said they wouldn't. But after they said they wouldn't, now God was not going to be with them because they still have the baggage. You see what I mean? They still haven't gotten rid of it. They have the same spirit. They don't have the different spirit. Even though now they're saying they're willing to do exactly what he said, but they're not in the right spirit. Look what he says. They're like, here we are. We've sinned, but we will go up. And then Moses comes back at them and says, why then are you transgressing the commandment of the Lord when it will not succeed? So he's saying, like, God told you you're done and you are now in disobedience, and God, this ain't going to work. Is what Moses says. So he says, do not go up, or you will be struck down before your enemies, for the Lord is not among you. It was always his presence that gave them victory. Always his presence. It wasn't their might. It wasn't their power. It was the presence of God that always gave them the victory. And Moses knows that. And he's like, God isn't with you guys. Like, you had your chance, and you can't go up there in this wrong spirit. It's weird because they literally are doing exactly what God told them to do. But the problem is they don't have the right spirit. It's now too late. And he says, God isn't going to be with you. And then verse 43, for the Amalekites and the Canaanites will be there in front of you, and you will fall by the sword, inasmuch as you have turned back from following the Lord, and the Lord will not be with you. This is like, oh my gosh. But listen to this. But they went up heedlessly, like they didn't listen to Moses, to the ridge of the hill country, Neither the ark of the covenant of the Lord nor Moses left the camp. And of course, the ark of the covenant symbolized the presence of God. So they didn't go with the presence. Moses didn't go because he's not stupid. Verse 45. Then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who lived in that hill country came down and struck them and beat them down as far as Hormah. Now, here's the deal. Once again, I just want to reiterate, you can't go into the promised land holding on to the past, either the good or the bad. The Israelites even tried to take it later. And because they still had the wrong spirit, still holding on to this stuff, they couldn't. They were beaten down. And I am desperate for everyone to move forward. I am desperate for everyone to step into all that God has for them. I know the battles have been long. Trust me, I know. I know that these battles have been brutal, and some of them you're wondering, can I even make it? You're like, I don't know if I can even believe anymore, God, because I've been beaten down so much. I know it's been a long time. But it's in that, even in that place, if you're in that place where you go, okay, all right, I'm not, I love him. I know who he is. And therefore, like I said here, I am going to release my relational pain. I'm going to get over the hurt that came from lack of provision. I'm going to let go of past situations and experiences, the ones that formed me. I'm even going to stop living in the past where God moved in power, 20 years ago or whatever. I'm going to let go of this kind of thing. I want to tell you something real brief that kind of sums this up, and this is how I'll end this. If you guys are familiar with the Vineyard movement, I became very familiar with it because of a prophetic encounter I had that involved John Wimber and probably Lonnie Frisbee. Before I even knew who either one of them really were, I had been prayed over by Lonnie Frisbee as a 16-year-old, but that's another story. So anyway, I'm very familiar with them now because of that. So anyway, I had known that the flagship vineyard, and by the way, this ties in, so just hold on a second. I had known that the flagship vineyard was in Anaheim, California. One year, I took a bunch of youth, I think maybe 40 or so, 30, 40, down to Southern California to go to a conference down there. And I thought, since it was we're going to be there over the weekend. We were there for like a week, I think. So we were there over the weekend that let's go to their Sunday morning service. Because this was the flagship vineyard, John Wimber's church, the 5,000 plus member, vineyard church in Anaheim. That was just the hub of the Spirit and the move of God and the power of God. And so my thought, by the way, this is like, I want to say, I don't know, 2012 or 2015, something like that. And I thought, this would be great. Let's go to church on Sunday morning. I'll take the whole youth group down there to this flagship vineyard. Now I get down there and I barely make it across the threshold and I start to cry. And it is like the weirdest thing. I'm like overwhelmed with emotion. And I'm not even sure why I'm crying, but I could feel this like mourning and loss and pain. And so we finally make our way into the sanctuary. What I realized is probably, I would venture to say 60% maybe of the sanctuary was all cordoned off. Like they had curtains blocking it off because they had this big, huge sanctuary that probably sat, I don't know what it sat, 1,000 maybe at least. And maybe there was 200 people there at the most. And the feeling of the place was loss and grief and longing. And I actually went around and prayed for some of the people as I'm crying. And some of the youth were crying too, and they didn't know why they were crying. And I realized, and as I talked to these people, they were so longing for yesterday. They were longing for the 80s and like the early 90s. And they had all these great memories and they so wanted it back, but it wasn't there and it wasn't coming back, not in the way they wanted it. And it was so dang sad because I could feel like God had something else for them, but they couldn't let go. And they couldn't let go of the pain and the loss and all the stuff that had happened in the church. And I don't want that for you. I don't want that for anybody. I want us to go into the new thing, releasing the old and moving forward. So that's the word that I have. Whatever your journey is, I hope we can relate in some way. Work through some of these 6 things before the Lord, release it, determine not to go there, and determine to go, all right, I'm releasing all of that, Lord, because I want to have, like Caleb, a different spirit. And I thought that was just so powerful the way it hit me. So anyway, all right. Hope that was helpful. Love you guys. I will see you on Friday after you, if you're watching this, I'll see you on Friday as I have a new guest on for the podcast. Way excited about that. All right. So I'll talk to you guys very soon.